So now that we've gone over the out-of-the-box site templates and list and library templates, let's go over a couple of the items that you'll need to think about when you're using these. The first is remember that you have a recycle bin and site collection recycle bin. The reason why I mention that is a lot of people aren't as aware of that or sometimes think that it's an infinite size. As you're creating all of the SharePoint lists and libraries, share a common recycle bin. All of your subsites roll up into the site collection recycle bin. So there's a little bit of a difference in where those go. The nice thing about that is that even if in the subsite is deleted, you may be able to pop it back up into the site collection. On the other hand, only the manager is going to be able to see that site collection recycle bin. So be aware of who can see what and where they can do it. One thing that we're going to look at when we actually do managing the sites is making sure that you have the right permissions on this. Some places they're happy with letting everyone see the recycle bin. Other organizations like for managers to know when things need to be brought back from that recycle bin. So just be aware of it and know what's going on. Also, make sure that you're aware of how much space you have in that recycle bin. There are some settings that you need to be aware of on how when a recycle bin is emptied. If you're like me on the desktop, you tend to keep your recycle bin pretty clean. In SharePoint, things tend to fill up the recycle bin until it gets flushed out, and sometimes you don't realize that things are being flushed. So being aware of what's going on, especially in the subsite recycle bin, the site collection recycle bin, is pretty important. When we go to the managing, we'll go through that, but I just wanted to bring that out here because it is something that a lot of people don't think of until, to be honest with you, it's too late. When we go through the management, you'll need to be aware of how to do your analytics and audits. Again, things like team sites tend to not do this as much. Larger sites like maybe a corporate communications site or something that's got a more dedicated team tends to do the analytics a bit more. I would say that as a manager of a SharePoint site, you do at least look at the audit logs once a week at least, even if you just skim them. The audit log is going to tell you when something unexpected is happening and let you get ahead of that a lot faster than you would otherwise. Again, when we do the management, I'm going to go through how to set up the different audit rules. But if you're a manager of a SharePoint site, be aware that you can actually go through, you can see who's using who's using the site with the analytics, who's accessed what information with the audits, who's deleted items, and be able to go through and catch problems before they get too large. At best, you can actually go through and see who needs some more help or who might be confused or need a little extra training. At worst, you can actually find where people are trying to do something malicious or something that they shouldn't have permissions to do and be able to take whatever actions you need there. So it's very valuable to have that insight into your SharePoint site. SharePoint allows you to do external connections. When we looked at the adding the app and saw the external data connection, SharePoint traditionally has had a kind of focus on what's in a site stays in a site, and what's inside the site collection itself is kind of pretty much that top level. But there's been a lot of work in SharePoint with bringing in external connections, everything from the business data connectivity services with external links from other lists with all kinds of different things. So as we go through and modify it, I'll point out when there's the ability to pull in information from outside the current list or the current site. And just be aware that that's something that is kind of constantly evolving. And I'll also, as I see that, point out to you, there are some places inside of SharePoint where those connections happen on the server side, which is very valuable, which means you get a lot of horsepower to actually do things like joins and the rest. But then with SharePoint 2013 and going forward, there's also a lot of these connections that happen on the client side. This has kind of traditionally been things like connected web parts, which I see very, very few people using, but they're very valuable. And there's a lot of different ways of letting your users, and especially power users, come in and see things not just off of one piece of information, but actually tie it all together into a very harmonious whole. So be aware of how you look at that. And again, as I go through the management, we're gonna go deeper into that, but I want to mention it right now just so you can pay attention when we get to that point. The BDC connections, they need to be enabled on your SharePoint implementation, but if they are, you can actually, those BDC connections let you actually tie into everything like your Active Directory, to databases, to applications that have web services, to all kinds of different things, and gather that information in. So BDC connections also allow you to pool licenses. So if you've got something that you just need a common license with, you can give everybody the same access or the same account that they access through. But if you've got something that you actually need people to be able to do updates and the rest on, you can actually have them pass through with single sign-on and be able to work with that. The data connection library lets you actually have data throughout SharePoint that becomes accessible. So being able to come up, see that data, being able to drop it in place and be able to work with it can be very valuable. Again, a lot of this depends upon what you want to publish out with your SharePoint location and what other users of SharePoint want to publish back to you. This is things such as, common item for this is, say, trademark information from corporate communications, or legal information or legal disclaimers that come out of your legal group. Having those data, having that be able to tie in and have that always up to date is very valuable for those groups and can save your organization a lot of time and money. And then the external list itself. This is actually the ability to pull in information from a separate list to be able to go, hey, I want a choice off of this list, and the items that are there comes into place. Say, for example, a product list that you have. You've got products for your organization. Anytime something new comes up, you want it immediately accessible to the organization. Being able to have that external list, be able to pop up and do that becomes very, very useful. So those are the kind of the pieces we're looking at here. One of the things that you need to be thinking of as you're looking through these different sites and subsites is choosing that right template to get started with. Even if you're going to customize it, it's always valuable to kind of start with what's closest, because that saves you time. And there's also a little bit of tips and tricks in there that they've been put in that may help guide you into the right path. So collaboration sites, be thinking about your team sites, your project sites, maybe even your department sites and how those go into place, how you put those in, and how they can actually be valuable for you. Your project sites themselves. What I tend to do with collaboration sites and project sites, these tend to be fairly similar, and a lot of people kind of wonder what the difference is. For collaboration sites, look at things that kind of go on into the future. These are generally organizational, and while we do know that there are reorgs and departments come and go, generally that's not a fixed location, whereas project sites tend to be for a duration. You have a project that starts, has a duration, has a deliverable, and ends, and you may even have multiple project sites under that. You may have different phases or different generations of projects that go in there. So when you're looking at those, be thinking about not just, say if you've got a new project, does it fit under an existing site? Does it fit as a sub-project of a different project, so it would go into there? Or does it actually maybe fit under a department? You've got a project for your IT department for modernization, maybe it should go under that location. So not just what template you're doing, but where it fits it can make things a lot easier once you get into that place. Note that once you've put it into a location, it's not the easiest thing to move a site around. So if you think about it ahead of time, it makes it a lot easier later on. But just because you put it in the wrong place doesn't mean it can't be done. Basically what you do is you export the site, as you can do it as a template, or you can do it onto the server side with your data, remove it from the original location, and then restore it to where you want it to go. So things can be a little bit, it takes a little bit more information and a little bit more work, but you can actually move it around, but it's easier if you put it in the first place. The team sites themselves, collaboration sites for departments. If you actually have teams in place, this is kind of the mix between that collaboration and project sites. Teams sometimes come and go, sometimes are steady. So these could actually tie into either one of the others. Your organization is probably going to make a difference on how that does. One of the main things you're looking at with the team side is giving your teams a place to gel, to have a little bit of ownership in for what they're doing, and maybe work with things cross projects. So just be aware of that's kind of a little bit more focused in the collaboration, but a little bit more wide ranging than your project sites. Your publishing sites are for those large, only a couple of people writing, a lot of people reading. Maybe this is your corporate news site. Maybe this is investor relations. Maybe this is HR. There's a lot of kind of things that fit under this publishing site. And they become what you generally think of as your portal sites. These are read by a lot of people. You may want to be able to have RSS feeds off of them, or notifications, push notifications, alerts, and those kind of things. So be thinking about that as you go into the place. Again, collaboration tends to be more one-on-one. Project sites tend to be for the people on the project. Team sites are for the people on the team. Publishing sites tend to be a small team of people managing content for a large group of readers.